Sorry, guys.
Take two.
There was some audio problems. Like last week with Teddy Riley and Babyface, technology can be so unreliable sometimes. Well, welcome to Game Changing Chat. Again, this is not deja vu. Today, we're going to be talking about mental health awareness, and I have a special guest, Dr. Shabazz, chaplain in the United States Army. Welcome, Dr. Shabazz.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. So, for those of us who do not know you and do not know your backstory, please tell us why you are an expert in adversity.
Well, I am an expert in adversity, not because I got degrees. I'm an expert in adversity because I've had a tumultuous life. And I start off all of these things the same way. At 10 years old, I was molested by a family friend, which caused a downfall of things that would happen into my life with self-esteem and low self-worth. I got into the eighth grade and I was in special education. I failed the ninth grade and I also failed the 12th grade because I still was dealing with a host of issues from the molestation. Just when I got on my feet, I was allowed to play basketball because back then, as I say many times, most times people are not focused on your grades or your acumen or your intelligence. They were focused on this big body that I have. So I got a scholarship to play basketball. And while I was playing basketball there, I still was drinking myself to sleep at night, womanizing, being very, very what we call misguided. Some people call thuggish. But that was the only way that I was acting out because I had so much rage inside of me. So I was fighting. I was going to jail periodically. And it all came to a head one night while I was shot in the back and I was beaten with a shovel within an inch of my life. I was airlifted out to Tyler Medical Center where I almost lost my life, and I'm at 21 years old. And as I say many times, you would think that that would be a wake up call. For most people, it probably would have been, but I was still I hadn't resolved the issues inside of me. So 6 months later, when I returned to school, I had a sawed-off shotgun and a 45 that my so-called friends had gave me to kill this boy. I saw him, and I was about to pull out the gun, and one of my friends who is now passed on now, he was on the basketball team. He said, Michael, if you kill that boy, you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail and you're going to disappoint a lot of people. He said, why don't you just beat him up? Right. So I beat him up really, really bad with a crowbar, broke 20 of his ribs and knocked out all his teeth, unfortunately. And I went to jail. And I went to jail for some time. Um, my court date came forth, and as I say many times, I tell you, and I think about young men who are in the court system. The judge called me a thug. She called me. I forgot. Sometimes I forget because it's so traumatic. She called me fecal matter. She called me fecal matter. Earth, trash, thug. It's guys like you who are ruining our society. And after she berated me, she said, "Do you have anything that you'll say for yourself?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am. The guy shot me 6 months ago, and I was afraid for my life, and um, I just decided to get him back." She called the counselors up, and she said, "Is this true?" They said yes, and by his mercy, I was let loose that day. Okay, so that for me is an introduction of who I am and why I'm so driven, right, to be not only be resilient for myself, but be resilient for those people who are around me to show them that you can transform your life with the
Yes.
right attitude and the right of you. Yes.
Yes. I like that. The driven, and you can transform your life no matter what you've gone through. Your life is truly a testimony. And to that point, let's discuss the topic that you chose to have this beautiful, beautiful conversation. Life is a sermon. Be careful how you preach it. Why did you choose those words?
I chose them for a variety of reasons because I want my life, first of all, to be a testimony to human beings of the realm of possibility of change. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you come from. It doesn't matter what color you are. You know, you're not a product of your environment. You're a product of your decisions, right? And if you're a
Yes.
product of your decisions, you have the opportunity to change your life. And I needed to model that because I have children and I have a wife, you know, and I have a saying that you cannot teach your children to fly if you don't have wings, right?
Yes.
Most of us tell our kids how important education is, tell our kids how important being intelligent is, and how being driven and ambitious is, and we ourselves are not driven. We're not ambitious. We don't have any goals, right? So when I say your life is a sermon, be careful how you preach it. Your preaching is not your mouth. Your life
Mhm.
is preaching to those people around you, and they say, "Oh well, mommy's not doing anything, daddy's not doing anything, and they seem to be doing well. So why do I be ambitious and educated?"
Oh, wonderful. I love it. Um, you're a chaplain on top of all those degrees, four masters, two PhDs, but you're a chaplain. What inspired you to choose that line of work?
Yeah, that's an interesting question that comes up for me a lot. I didn't choose chaplain because I was some holy person that needed to go around and tell people how to be holy, right? Actually, when I was a young private first class, I was being treated really badly in the unit. I had just changed my name from Michael Barnes to Khalid Shabazz. I was enamored with Malcolm X, and so the people in the unit they were treating me really really poorly, calling me the enemy, saying I had switched sides, you know, and all kind of stuff. And I was in the field and I was crying. And honestly, I saw the chaplain off in the distance, and I said, God, if you have any mercy, please don't send the chaplain over here to talk to me. I can't take it, right? I can't take it. And he came over to me and he ministered to me for an hour. And he said, "Why don't you become a chaplain to help people who are in distress like yourself?" I said, "Oh my God." I mean, it felt like, honestly, that sun had shined on me for the first time in my life. I had found my purpose in an instant, right? I had found it, and all that pain and all that trauma. That man, when he said that, I found my purpose because I said to myself, that's how I can get to talk to young men and young women and inspire them to be great. So when people come into my office, I know they probably thinking a whole lot of stuff. But my job is to make sure that they leave their office stronger than when they came in. And coincidentally, I have put 77 people through officer school. I help people with their papers in school. I put people in my college classes. I mean, I do a host of things to show people that they can be more than they think they are. That's why I became a chaplain.
That's wonderful. And I know you're very humble, but please tell people about one of the honors or one of the titles that you have. You're the first what chaplain?
Yeah, I'm the first Islamic chaplain who's achieved the rank of colonel in the United States Army history, like of all the
Yeah,
services, whether it's Air Force,
yeah.
Coast Guard, whatever service this is. I'm the first person to achieve this rank. So every job that I take from here on is historical in that context, and so I post that stuff to ensure that young people out there. It's a reason, you know. Everything that I post is strategic, right? It's a reason because if a person like me, right, can make it in the United States, I'm a Muslim, right? We've been in the Middle East for 18 years, right? If a person like me who seems to be counterculture to what the military is doing can make it, my message is to young men and young women out there: it doesn't matter who you are, be true to yourself, work hard, and you can accomplish anything that you want to accomplish. So that historical thing is phenomenal to me.
It is wonderful. Thank you. Um, right now, where our nation, the world is going through this pivot because of uh, COVID-19, and people are grieving because so many lives have been lost. Millions of people have lost their jobs. People are going through uh, grieving because they've lost families. People have suffering who've never had mental health issues are going through challenges there. Why is mental health, talking about mental health, um, more important now than ever?
Well, mental health is something that we have, not only us, but specifically African Americans, that have dealt with since our coming to the shores of North America. Because you're talking about 400 years of trauma, right? Of being separated from our family, not having the knowledge, not being able to read, not having rights. And then just when we think that we're up on our feet, here comes Jim Crow. Here comes the Voter Rights Act. Here comes Board of the Board of Education, where we had to fight to be in the same school. So when you talk about mental illness, right, on top of all of the racism and discrimination, well, you got a powder keg there. And so compounded to that, we have a community that stigmatizes mental illness. No, boy, don't go to no doctor. You know, you crazy. You been crazy, right? And so we have a stigma of mental illness. So my suggestion when you're talking about mental illness is to always find somebody who is a trusted agent to be able to talk to. I mean, because these are dire times. When you talk about COVID-19, on top of mental illness, now you have all of these stressors of life, right? No job, unemployment, staying in the house. That'll make you crazy itself. And so if you already have some type of mental illness, this only compounds the problem. So to me, you have to find somebody, a trusted agent, which is very difficult in this world, to find a trusted agent or a person that you can talk to help you through those things.
Thank you. And let's dig a little deeper and talk about being vulnerable. Those individuals who have struggled with suicide, I know I have. What do you say to those who are struggling with suicide? What do you advise them to do? Um, who should they reach out to when they're feeling that way?
Well, suicide, I tell you, it is a door into the I mean a pathway into to tumultuous mental psychology. I mean, I was on the verge of suicide because I hadn't completed anything else. I had failed in everything else besides bouncing a basketball. All right, my
Mhm,
wife is here. I was a horrible husband.
mhm,
I was self-absorbed. I was still drinking. I was still doing God knows what. I was getting ready to get chaptered out of the army. And so
mhm,
when I looked around, I said to myself, I'm a horrible father, right? My kids probably don't like me. My wife, I don't know if she liked me. God knows why she would like me. And I said to myself, I'm failing in the
mhm,
military. I'm about to get out of the military. The best thing for me is to just end it all. At least they'll get some money from it. But I was
mhm,
fortunate in the sense where a man decided to take me under his wing and said, it's okay to fail. It's okay.
mhm,
I used to be, and he took
mhm,
me. So you go back to talk about illness. It had to have some mental illness in me and trauma
mhm,
to
mhm,
to to. And so this man, regular man, right? This is why I talk
mhm,
about your life is a sermon because you preach
mhm,
it. This man took the time me and let me talk and let me express myself. And even though he was a higher rank than me, when we went
Mhm.
out to dinner, he treated me like a man in front of my wife and my kids. Like that's healing properties, you
Mhm.
know? And I don't think we do that. You made it worse.
I made it worse. Oh, I thought it was really hungry.
There you go. That's better.
Mhm.
That's why you need a good wife. He actually made me look better. Yeah, I'm sure she could speak to.
Zakiya, I'm trying to figure out how you're so light on here. Like your picture is very clear and ours
And
is
we have a
very blue.
we have a
If you ask me.
what is this called, Andrew? What kind of light? An LED
Oh, the
light
ring
in
light,
front of us. Yes.
like the makeup artist.
What
Yes.
you
That
talking
yes.
about?
Yeah,
Okay.
she's right on. Isn't her
Yeah,
scarf pretty? The scarf is pretty.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
yeah, I'm sure from her childhood trauma. I mean, both of us went through traumatic childhood. I'm sure she could speak to that as well. Overcoming that. I mean, this thing is about being resilient.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, both. I often say people ask about marriage and what makes us a perfect couple. It's two imperfect people who refuse to give up on each other. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
refuse on it with all of our junk, right? And all of her junk. We say we're gonna find a way to make this thing work.
Hmm.
Right.
Mrs.
I
Shabazz,
also,
would you like to make it have any comments?
I'll just comment a little bit on the COVID-19 grieving process.
Hmm.
And I don't know if I would call it COVID-19 grieving process, although it looks a little bit different. It kind of still goes through the same phases that the grieving process would go through. And it's pretty much, I would say, likened to an ocean. So there's waves and ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's calm. Sometimes it's the waters are rough. And instead of trying to get someone out of the rough waters and you might maybe cause yourself harm, you teach people early how to swim so that in any of those waters they can save themselves. So
Right.
you really save somebody else. As much as we try to, people in turn have to work through their process in order to even get where they need to be. Otherwise, it's your process. It is about talking about issues and concerns, regardless to who we're talking to, and it needs to be an everyday thing. So if I know that I have childhood trauma and I only want to talk about it certain times, or if I'm in a counseling session, no, I talk about this with my friends, with my family. We get ideas from each other to try and figure out how to best approach that. That way, when the waters become rough, you remember the people who made it through. You remember those things, much like us when it comes to our ancestors. Sometimes we pull on that strength, maybe not enough, and that might be by virtue of what someone's been taught about what their ancestors had to struggle through. So that's the learning to swim part. You teach them what people struggled to get you to this point. When you get to a point, you rely on that. And so in that same essence, people just we will need to teach them how to swim and not try to fix the problem for them.
That's wonderful, wonderful information. Please stay right there. Okay. What are some of the challenges that you think that individuals are facing with mental health conditions right now?
I think so. For me, I am a proponent of domestic violence and child abuse. And so I am an advocate for those women and children and men and children who are suffering through that process. And during COVID-19, if you look at the statistics
That's
and the
right.
numbers, those cases are rising. We've got perverted men in homes that are making the child abuse cases rise now. We've got men who are out of jobs and their strength is to hit a woman, or women who are out of job and their strength is to be emotionally abusive. And so one of the big concerns or problems I think in our community that we have is we tend to rely on the traditional aspect, which is our religious institutions. Right. But the reality is, everybody has a job and everybody is specialized in their job. That's and right. So, a minister, a chaplain, or a preacher, or whoever that might be, if their area of domestic violence, if that's not their area, we should not necessarily rely solely on them to help us through that process, but we should be seeking out the professional people right. who know the signs, who can help you through the process, who can give you the right resources. Because for people in the mosque or the church or the synagogue or wherever that is, they are going to tell you what they think God might say. And they don't even have the minds of God. You know what I mean? Some of them. Mm-hmm. And so people are encouraged to stay and work it out because God will see you through it, and they continue. And so that eventually causes a big mental health break for our community. If you go into any communities, you can see people who are together, even if they're together for 25 years, the first 10, 15 years, they were in rough domestic violence situations. They got tired of it, but the mental issues that come along with it are forever.
Yeah. That's good.
So you're talking about, like, in the Christian church, how they'll say, just pray on it. That's the old way of thinking. You need to actually see a licensed therapist or psychiatrist or something of that nature.
Yeah, and I think what she's talking about and should be suggested is people inside those institutions who are licensed therapists and maybe of the Christian tradition, right? Because she's talking about all of us. I can tell you everything about religion. That doesn't mean I'm a trained therapist. I think it's really profound what she's saying. In our community, the minister is in all, and that's not correct. That's not right, right? That's not right. So I'm and courageous for her to say that, because that is also a stigma in our community, saying that the minister can't solve everything. Yes.
Right.
So and it just and those mental
3-second delay.
Oh, okay. So those mental health issues are prevalent in our communities as a result of that, because one of the things that hurt us is because our African American men are persecuted so much that if we are in those type of situations, we don't want to involve the police, because it might be better for me to take a butt whooping than him to go to jail and be beat to death. So then but the mental shackles of that is still there. And so we have to come and we have to teach people that I don't have to call the police on you, but I don't have to stay here either.
Right. That's an excellent point. Let's talk about why the lived experience is so important. Why is it important for people who actually have these mental health ailments, whether it's PTSD, anxiety, or depression, for them to actually utilize their authentic voice and talk about it?
Well, I think that's kind of where we were going. The stigma is so prevalent, we don't want to talk about it. And so if you notice what I did in my opening is I talked about all of my trauma, right?
Yes.
Because before you talk about your trauma, you've given it voice and you're healing yourself. And so some people ask me, "Oh, you're so transparent. Why are you telling all of your business?" It's therapeutic. What you go to counselors to do. But it's accepted in the testimony community. So what I have done, I heal myself every time I go out and speak to people, right? It's accepted in that form. So I had to find a gate, what we do in the academic world, we find what's called a gap in the literature so we can finish our dissertations, right? And so I found a gap. I found out where it's accepted for me to talk about my trauma, and everybody applauds you, right? But in the same sense, what this beautiful woman was talking about, that you need to take that trauma to somebody who is specialized in that and talk yourself through it so you can heal. I just found a different way to do it, right?
And I personally, is the opposite of Khaled when it comes to my trauma. Um, I still work through my trauma, but I do have a select group of girlfriends who carry me through that process. I have my first cousin, so I come from a grandmother who has 14 children, 7 girls, 7 boys, and from them is my mom, from her is me, from me is my daughter, from my daughter are my grandgirls or granddaughters. And so 5 generations. And for me, it was just, this is how I will break the cycle. I will talk about it as much as I can, as often as I can, as to not shame anyone. Because I do realize that some of the things that happen was because that's what they were taught. It's what they know. But
Mhm.
I have reconciled with them to say we swept this crap under the rug for a long time, but it's quite dirty under there. So the only way for us to flatten this out is to start sweeping that stuff out. We don't have to sweep it out all at one time. I can't clean a whole house by myself at one
Right.
time, but I can take a little bit of time and then work through that process. And I am a person who reveals when it needs to be revealed. So when I'm talking with someone and they are going through their trials or their tribulations, and if I can tell them from where I came to some hope, then I share that information.
Yeah, and so now the title comes back. Your life is a sermon. Be careful how you preach it, right? So we as a family, Team Shabazz, exemplify that. We share our pain in our life to let you know that this house and these cars and this success didn't come with it just on a gold strip. It was a lot of pain, it's a lot of trauma, and it's still a lot of work, right? It's still a lot of work. You can't be fooled by the Facebook post. It's still behind the scenes a lot of work, and a lot of things that you're still trying to overcome, right? And so,
Well,
last to say to that question, um, one of my favorite sayings that I developed: "You're not a product of your environment. You're a product of your thinking." So people,
mhm.
when giving back, it's not giving money, it's giving back. We came from very bad environments, and we get to share our testimony and inundate it into people and say, this type of love is possible. That's not prevalent in our community, right? A man who basically every Thursday highlight my wife, and you get the guys that are like, oh, what is he doing? Like, that's weak. No, it's not weak. I have to change your thinking so that it's okay for you to love, and then so you're inundating those people different in the same environment.
Well, I have a question, Dr. Shabazz. We talked about this once before. I love your post, your Facebook, and um, I know you've talked about this before, that as you become to rise, that your circle will start to get smaller. And then I guess you can start to
Yes.
see who really is on your team. So how do you emotionally feel about that when you thought, oh wow, this was really my friend, but you're beginning to see as you to get more, I guess, light, that some of the people you really thought were on your team aren't. How does that register with you?
Well, everything for me is a cognitive process. So it would be funny to you, like somebody asked me one time, because I'm always highlighting my wife on Facebook and kissing her on the face and all that kind of stuff. And he said, "Do you trust your wife 100%?" I said, "Young man, I don't even trust myself 100% because I have lied to myself, right?" And so
Hmm.
my point to this is, I never go into a relationship with a person who is a so-called friend and give them all of my trust. I'm always evaluating them. They are always in an interview process for me because you can tell, right? I'm a careful listener, and this may sound odd to you. If I'm in a conversation with a friend, and after the second time he starts to slight me, I start making mental notes, and I
Mm.
start to myself, is this guy or this girl on my team, right? Because there's an old saying, you'll never be an eagle hanging around chickens. And
Yeah.
once these start to say you can't do that, Oh, you arrogant. Oh, you this. To
Mhm.
me, that's got something inside of them, and I don't have time to deal with that because life is difficult as it is. I mean,
Mhm.
just for me, right? Trying to stand up and be an intelligent African American man, you wouldn't know how difficult that is, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't have
Mhm.
time to carry the baggage of these people who are saying, "Oh yeah, you always talking about this, you always talking about your degrees, and you always see those people you got to weed out."
Okay.
Colin Powell said, never take advice from unproductive people,
Mhm.
right? That that is paramount because
Mhm.
sometimes I gotta be with you, and this doesn't go over well with a lot of people, but sometimes we are so weak in our self worth. You let those people tag along, even though they're destroying part of your self esteem because you don't want to hurt them, yet they're hurting you every day by slighting you in your face to your children, to your friends, right? And so I'll just end with that in the sense of you'll never be an eagle hanging around chickens. You just won't, and you have to be strong enough to make those decisions.
I really need to hear that, as I'm pretty sure a lot of the listeners. How does racism, and you touched on this a lot, impact mental health? I pose that to both of you.
Oh, good. So go ahead. You want to talk to that first?
No, you go ahead. Talk to it
Okay.
first.
So let's talk about what racism is first of all. Racism is an insidious disease where a person or persons think that they are better than you because of their skin color, right? I'll give you an example of what racism does. Racism takes away your self esteem, your self efficacy, your self worth. It even makes you look in the mirror to think that your nose, your face, your hips are not good enough, and you implode in on yourself. What an insidious disease. And second of all, so you're talking about mental health. I think racism, discrimination, and prejudice is compounded and causes mental health problems, right? So all of us are already growing up in environments where it's very toxic, right? It's very it's not amenable to the human spirit, and so you put racism on top of that, and that's why I think you have so many people exploding. I want to say, in the military, we've been in the Middle East for 18 years, right? Those of us who have multiple deployments, we have what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. Dr. Joy DeGruy, a very interesting book. I think people should read it. It's called Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Her hypothesis was for people have been enslaved for 400 years, right? Their families have been broken up. The men and women have been beaten for from can't see morning to can't see night and receive no pay. She surmises that they have to have some mental illness and post traumatic stress, right? And so you finally get out of slavery. Now you have Jim Crow. You got to deal with Jim Crow. Now you got to deal with the voters' right restrictions. And now you got to deal with trying to get into schools that don't want you in there. So you're talking about mental illness. Now that's a big picture of mental illness, but you got to know that every African American or minority in this country goes through that type of mental illness just on a daily level. Um, I'll end with this because I'll just continue to talk. But
And
um,
I'm just gonna say one thing
it's,
about it.
I was working out this morning at about 3:30 this morning. I'm 51 years old, and when a cop car passed me, I almost froze
Mhm.
because I'm thinking I'm out 30 in the morning. What man is out here 3:30 in the morning working out? And I'm thinking of what they thinking. Thinking like, oh my God, what if he stops? I have no weapons. I have no ID. My
Mhm.
life could be tragic like that. That's trauma.
Mhm.
That's trauma. So I'll that and let her talk about it.
So, and I feel like a lot of times with racism and mental health, we see it a lot in our working environments. So you can
Mhm.
be a strong You take a job where you're one of many. And even if you're not one of many, if you're trying to succeed to the top, you take a different stance. And I'm going to use myself as the example today. I'm in a job today that I took the job as a challenge. However, the people that I'm surrounded with and working with are chipping away at the soul of who I am right now.
Mm.
Yeah.
If I were in another environment, I probably would not feel this way. But at this moment, it is a matter of, are you able to get out of your working environment? Is it making you, is this what's paying the bills for you?
Mm.
So there are people who can't get out of it. I'm living with the idea and with the knowledge and with the wherewithal where, okay, if I really don't want to be here, I can just tell my husband I'm not working.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not going to affect the house, any of that right now.
Right.
So, but other people don't have opportunity.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine people dealing with their own self-esteem issues and they go into the work environment, someone is making them feel less than, or even if they're not, the perception that they are is enough.
Yes.
So anytime you say something to me, I always feel like, did she just try to belittle me? Like, did she really just throw me out there like sabotage? Like, because we've never done it like that before. And all of a sudden today, I was on a conference call. Normally, this chief executive always leads the call. She always starts with what our program is, what our mission is, what we're doing, what numbers we want to create by the end of the year, the end of the pilot program. And then all of a sudden, she threw me out there. She was like, Rhonda, would you like to? And I'm like, what? Why would you say that? I need to prep for this. I mean, yes, I could ramble, but that's not my way of doing things. Yeah. Now, if I were another person, that could have crushed my soul.
Yes.
And then, all of that starts to make you think, am I smart enough?
Yes.
Am I good enough? You know what I mean? All of those things then come into play. I have some internal things to say, oh, you have me mixed up with somebody else because, first of all, this is not my normal line of work. I took it because I am what I would consider in transitional grief right now as a military spouse. Mm-hmm. When we transition from one place, we lose a lot. So grief is about death, but it's about what you lose in the process. So we're always losing a job, losing friends, losing the house that we got in, losing the familiarity of the town and grocery stores and, all of those things. So for me, I'm just taking the job because I do need something to do because I'm an extrovert. I want to be, moving around and doing things. And so I can only imagine someone else who's not in the same situation or not in the same secure place, both mentally, physically, financially, all of that, what it could do to their mental health, having to go home every night mad about the job. And the first time he says something, it's me and him going back and forth, or the kids, or I lash out at the kids because they're small and they're running around and they're, doing what kids normally do, but you're so stressed out about your job that it's affecting everything about you, how you react to people, the emotions you have with them, all of that.
That's right.
Absolutely. Those microaggressions. That's what they are, the microaggressions at work that create the toxic work environment.
But Zakiya,
yes.
She doesn't have to deal with that because I'm such a loving husband.
But it happens all the time, but not just in the workplace. Hold on, I think we have a question. Just read the question. We have a question from Cynthia Tedderton Wilson. That's my aunt, and she's your soror, actually, Mrs. Sabaz. So unfortunate, but definitely relatable. However, at what point do you step back and step up and say something to these individuals?
So it depends on where you are in life. That's the thing. Okay. So a lot of times people are taught how to be assertive without someone taking it the wrong way. But of course, they look at, sometimes we are what they consider the angry black women, and I might
Mm-hmm.
say it in a way that somebody else, without the hand motions and all of the head moving kind of things, just passion, and someone else might take that the wrong way. In this particular line of work, it's about customer service too. So right now,
Mm-hmm.
this person is a client, and so it's
Oh.
about business. So you have to look at aspects
Mm-hmm.
of the business as well. For me,
Mm-hmm.
it is about knowing the way as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I am. I know
Mm-hmm.
how much I can take of it. I also give people the benefit of the doubt in everything. So I
Mm-hmm.
always think on her level, she is getting something from the top higher than her. They're getting something from the top that's higher than them. And it's trickling down. All of it is trickling down to me. And on top of
Mm-hmm.
their everyday, life, just because they're a different race doesn't mean that they're not dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with. So for me, and the godliness in me, the way I see it is I give people the benefit of the doubt for a good little bit. And then I have to make a decision. Is it worth saying something and making the situation that much worse? Do I really need the job to survive in life? Do,
Mm-hmm.
like, are willing to take the risk of getting fired? So there are a lot of things, and everybody has to look at that for their own circumstances. I would never want to tell someone, just walk away. God will be with you. So while I do believe that
Mm-hmm.
God will protect you, you still have to pay your bills at the end of the month too, right?
Right.
So it's really individualized. That's when you need the go-to girlfriends or the go-to sorors or the go-to people in your life to start resourcing and networking so that you can find other ways. You start making exit plans. That's what you start doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then
Mm-hmm.
know your exit plans. Just like if you were in a domestic violence situation, you might not be able to just walk without it being literally death for you,
Mm.
right? Same thing with
Mm-hmm.
your job. You could lose income, and that could feel like death to you. So you don't want to do it if you're in that situation. So everybody, it would look a little different. To that question, depending on who you are, what situation you're in, and how that will affect your life, the best thing to do is make a plan.
Yes.
And
Oh.
then you move forward with the plan.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is, how can a community get involved in solutions for ending mental health stigma? I know that both of you guys are in fraternities and sororities. How can we get involved with ending the mental illness stigma?
Well, I think, at least from my perspective, I'm an Omega, and not to
Mhm.
cast any aspersions on fraternity itself, but the AKAs, because I live with two, do a phenomenal job in the community. They're serious about business and they're serious about what the founder's intent was. In my particular fraternity, it seems like we're moving away. We have moved away from that and become more of a party aspect. And I'll give you an example. I was the boss list over in Germany. We raised $30,000 for scholarships. And if you know anything about fraternities, right, what happens is when, and not fraternity, let's just say my fraternity, a lot of the guys wanted to get in free, and I was saying, hey, no, we can't get in free because that money goes to the kids for the scholarships, right? And so I was trying to turn the organization into more business like, right? Um, It'd be interesting to know I did that. I was successful in doing that, but during the next election, I was voted out. Right, I got zero votes. Right, I mean zero votes. Actually took it as a great honor because that means I was doing my job. I wasn't going to even go. And this, you're talking about mental health and community. Part of that is having a good spouse in your life, right? Seriously, I mean, seriously, she'll tell you, she's right here. On many occasions, said I had denounced the fraternity and I was never going back. And she said, Khaled, they need you. You can't help anybody if you're not a part of them, right? And Part of our change, where you talk about community, is those people, even though we're in grief, even though we're in pain, even though that I had 1,000 more things I could have been doing to work on myself, I had to put myself back out there to help those people who also, in my opinion, who have traumatic situations in their lives and are still in a lot of times in stages where they need to grow up and realize the seriousness of in our community.
Mm.
I think I almost the question, but I will say this. Uh, AKA will snatch your pearls. So they don't play with you. That's just not happening with them. So, but I mean, I think that the way we get back at it, it is in every organization that you're a part of. If we're talking the
Yes.
talk and
Yes.
walking the walk,
Yes.
you can't be the person that go exercise. You need to exercise, but you 400 pounds overweight. Like you can't be that person. You have to be the person. If you're saying that this is important, you have to show people why it's important. Show them that you are as much a part of it as anyone is a part of it. Volunteer in the schools. We went to an alternative school, and it was sad, but it was also bitter. It was bittersweet because the fact that I have to see young girls in an alternative school for those, for some of those reasons, but to be
Hmm.
able to say to them, this is not the essence of who you have to be.
That's right.
Like this is not, you are not a mistake. There is not probably one teacher in here who didn't make a mistake early on in life. Maybe they didn't even have alternative schools when your teachers went through school, so they didn't have to go through that. So I'm not saying that what you did was wrong, but it is not the essence of who you have to be. And so we have to move forward, forward with that to be able to say to someone, it's okay for us to have girl talk. I have a young counselor that at JBLM in Washington that she does Girl Power Hour and Building Men program in her school. And she's a young girl. It's so amazing that I used to babysit her when she was 2, and now she's a school counselor. And she makes me so proud whenever I see her and the things that she's doing in her community. And she's doing it in Washington State, and in places where she is surrounded by everybody that doesn't look like her, but she's still building, and she's still building girls, she's building boys, she's showing them what that is. And when she invites people to come into her circle to work with them, they don't have to have a title, because she realizes that not everybody wants to be a lawyer or a doctor, that some people want to be a doctor, that some people want to be a cosmetologist, that some people want to work construction, and that doesn't require me to go to school. And so she invites all of us from different backgrounds and ages to be able to teach those young girls early on that this is normal.
Yeah.
What advice can you give the viewers watching this about how to reach their goals despite adversity that they've had in life?
Well, from my perspective, we talked about it a little bit. You have to get around people who have more experience than you. You have to get around people who have done more than you. I have a saying that you're the sum total of the 5 people you hang around. Most of us are so afraid to fail, right? We don't want to go talk to the persons who have made it out, because those persons are not considered. Unfortunately, they're not considered sometimes homogenous enough or black enough. We rather stay in our mediocrity, right? So whatever goals you have, you need to talk to people who are I call us real models. We're not role models. We want to share our trauma. We want to share our pain with you. We want to share our failures with you. So
and our happiness.
And happiness. We want to show you that sometimes you want to fall down in the dirt, but just don't stay there. All right. It goes back to this saying: your life is a sermon. Be careful how you preach it. You're not a product of your environment. You're a product of your thinking. Let me tell you, you're going to fail. Let me tell you, you're going to fail bad, but you're not really failing until you actually give up. And so those are what goals are. Most of us think it's just going to be an easy street to your goal. Both of us graduated from college after 20. I think you were 29. I was 28, right? And
Mm.
so what's important about it is, when my son just graduated, our son just graduated. Our son graduated at 27. And so I hugged him and he said, Dad, why are you crying? I said, I'm crying because you graduated college before me. I graduated at 28. He said, I never knew that. Right? But I needed to share an intimate moment with him to not only let him know that, son, you're not a failure. I have a saying that truth out of don't bring no harvest. I never knew what my grandmother was saying, right? But that truth, he didn't understand until I was crying in his arms on that day to let him know,
Oh.
son, you're right on time.
And for me, I think that goals are about what you can physically see with your eyes, not what you have in your mind, but you have to write it down. You have to
Mm.
have something on paper somewhere. It can be colored on paper, it can be construction paper, it can be newspaper. I don't care what it is. But if it's not written down, it's not a goal. It's just
Mhm.
something you hope you get because you
Mhm.
haven't really wrote anything to determine what you will do to get there, what resources you're going to need to get to that place, what happens if this resource fails. That's how you get to your goal. You don't you I need you to tell me if it's long term, if it's short term. I need to see it all written down. And you always have to keep in mind that, and I've seen this somewhere else, so I didn't think of it myself, but it sounds good and I like it. That
Mhm.
and it worked for during my time right now because I've been applying for some jobs that I really want, but for some reason just haven't been able to land them. And I was
Mhm.
really feeling pretty hard on myself, feeling really down on myself about it, knowing that it really has nothing to do with me. But I saw something that said rejection is just redirection.
Teach.
Mhm.
And so that's yeah,
Mhm.
that's the takeaway for me.
Oh, I love the synergy between you two. This is awesome. Oh.
Yeah. I rejected her first, and then she redirected herself to me. That's why.
So, please share your final thoughts.
Yeah, my final thoughts is honestly is all about who you are as a human being. I have thousands of quotes, but one of my quotes that I say at every speech is until you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at will never change, right? She just
Mhm.
said to you, rejection is redirection, right? It took
Yes.
her a period of time to get there. So guess what she did? She changed the way she looked at things, and it made her
Mhm.
look at things in a light and brought light to her, right? The second
Mm-hmm.
thing is if you change the people around you, change the people around you. This is very difficult. I didn't say that you had to stop communicating with them, but if they're not
Mhm.
going to get you where you give the majority of your time to those people because they're stopping you from your destiny and who you're supposed to be, right? That's very important, and that takes a level of courage, that takes a level of self-esteem, and that takes a level of
Mhm.
wherewithal. And as I in the beginning, before my wife came in, all of my buddies teased me about being married and being faithful and not going to the club. As a matter of fact, I went to wash my car one day and they were playing basketball and they were looking in the back seat and under the mats. I said, "What are y'all doing?" He said, "Well, we'll never see you without your wife," basically calling me a punk, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, if I didn't have a wherewithal of where I wanted to be and change my behavior on what I wanted as a family and not to be a statistic, I would have easily folded into that type of pressure, right?
Mhm.
So your life, be careful how you preach it.
For me,
Yes.
I guess final if for some reason you lost something, the very first thing you do is retrace your steps, right?
Mhm.
So the way I started to move forward is I had to go back and trace my steps from my childhood because that's really where it
Mm,
started. And if you show me any adult who is behaving a certain way, I can tell you where their trauma started in their childhood as a result of that. Because most of the time, that's where they're stuck. So we all have that inner child, and I call mine my inner little girl who sits on my shoulder sometime and whine about the things that happened to her. And most of us will have that process. There are a few people who've gotten away with never having any trauma in their life. But and for some of us, the trauma is a lot worse than others. But for me, it started, I had to go back and trace my steps. And that's the only way people can move forward because they're usually stuck in that time warp. When I was 10 years old, my mama did this, or when I was 15, somebody did this. If I ask you to recall a memory right now, you would probably remember the worst thing that happened to you
That's right.
because that's what that negativity, that bias is, to always remember the negative things and not the positive things. Generally speaking, those things that happened a long time ago. You didn't move past it at that time. It's still with you. So it is one of those things where for my final thoughts is just to retrace your steps.
thank you. What?
I was just gonna say before you end it though, you know, just
Okay. Andrew, who's my production assistant, wants me to let you know Donna tuned in from Washington, D.C., Winston Chauncey tuned in from Washington, D.C., Cynthia Wilson from Ohio, and Ernest from Georgia, Orrin Williams from Georgia. So a lot of shout outs, and they're saying they're really appreciating this talk. And they would
No
like to know
problem.
how can you please just list your contact information if they'll like to stay in contact with you.
Yeah, for me, it's Dr. Shabazz 05 at gmail.com. I'm on all the social media sites. I do morning updates of inspiration, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok now, right? I want to inspire a nation of being a realm of
And
possibility.
we share our Instagram account, so it's always easy. I can remind him, hey, did you see this comment from so and so?
Yeah.
You need to reply. I know when they're talking to him versus talking to me, kind of thing. And generally, every time that I comment, no, not generally, every time that I comment, unless it's a really girly girl comment or an AKA comment kind of thing, I always put hashtag the missus.
Well, that's really good to know. I would love to thank Team Shabazz, Mrs. Shabazz, and Dr. Shabazz. This was been wonderful. I really enjoyed the couple aspect. That really did really well. And thank you for both of us. Come say thank you, Andrew. All right.
I'm here.
All right.
Hello there, and thank you guys for dealing with the technical errors in the beginning. So we certainly
Yes,
appreciate that.
we certainly appreciate
No
You know,
problem. Good to see you, Andrew.
What's that? Yeah,
they say that we plan, God plan, and God is the best of planners. So you guys, the first time had a boring interview. Now you had the wife, and so it's more lively. Better. That's right.
yes.
So remember, it wasn't a rejection, it was a redirect.
there
There
it is.
you go, right
There
there.
it is.
Thank you. And to our followers, I decided to add this quick note. I have a new Facebook group that's about diversity and inclusion. You can follow it at bet.ly.geigc. And I'll put it in the notes if you want to connect about networking, diversity, inclusion, and we can just chit chat. It's a safe haven to talk about DEI. On that note, we're going to end this, and we'll see you next week with Dr. Rosalind Aker Black on Wednesday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.